Over the past few years, we've had something of a small slew when it comes to Super Smash Bros. Inspired casual fighting games. We've had Nickelodeon throwing its hat into the ring last year with their All-Star Brawl game, and other indie titles like Brawlhalla and Brawl Out popping up on both Steam and consoles over the past few years. And now we have Warner Bros. Jumping into the market with Multiversus. I think a lot of people have forgotten in the current era where Disney seems to own everything that Warner still owns a lot of valuable IPs within its domain. And Multiversus appears to be their initial attempt at flexing that here in the modern gaming market. Multiversus features a number of characters from properties such as DC Comics, Adventure Time, Game of Thrones, and others besides. And if the leaks are true, there are many more popular characters planned as part of future live service update releases. When you first boot up Multiversus, you'll be presented with the option of playing through a series of basic tutorials. While you can opt to skip these, I would recommend just putting yourself through them. They're relatively quick and painless and do a decent enough job teaching you what you need to know before you go online and face the general public. Plus, there's the added bonus of being granted a free instant character upon the completion of the basic tutorials. The character in question being Wonder Woman, who I'm only slightly disappointed isn't being voiced by Suzanne Eisenberg. Multiversus, as the marketing campaign clearly indicates, is positioning itself to be the ultimate WB fan-oriented fighting game, and a big part of that has involved bringing back a lot of the actors that have played or voiced their respective characters to do so again here. This includes bringing back Maisie Williams as Arya Stark, Tara Strong reprising her role as Harley Quinn, after having played her in the Batman Arkham games, and probably my favorite voice actor of all time, being Kevin Conroy, once again taking up the mantle of DC's Caped Crusader Batman. Lots of great returning talent. It's just a pity that the same can't be said of Wonder Woman. But hey, at least this voice actor is more convincing than Gal Gadot was as Wonder Woman on the silver screen, so there's that. Once you play through the tutorials, you have the main game ahead of you. The game does allow you to play through advanced tutorials if you choose to, but I never really found that all that necessary. The main menu, as you'll probably notice, is very minimalistic, which I don't mind at all, but you can clearly feel that made for console first vibe. As instead of having everything on one static screen, which would be ideal for a PC audience, they instead went for this Netflix playlist interface approach, which I have slightly mixed feelings on. I prefer to see all my game mode options in front of me, not hidden off to the left or right. There are currently 4 playable modes: 1v1, Teams, Co-op, and FFA. 1v1, of course, is fairly self-explanatory, pitting one player against another in a fight-to-the-death match. I do wish that they had just referred to teams as 2v2, because that's basically all it is. 2 teams of 2 with both a timer and a stock limit to ensure the match is sufficiently fast-paced. Co-op is useful as a sort of unofficial training mode, allowing you and another player to practice against 2 AI opponents in a 2v2 arena. The AI here is actually pretty good, to the point where I probably would have trouble distinguishing AI players from human players if I were just spectating a match and wasn't shown the usernames, which are the most obvious giveaway. While I'm sure some of this relatively low-skill display from human players is due to the game being fairly new, and most people haven't had a lot of time to practice or watch YouTube tutorials, so we'll probably see more of a disparity between human and AI players as time goes on. Currently, it's fairly even. Weirdly enough, at the time of recording, Multiversus does not offer a competitive mode, although by the time this video goes live, the competitive mode may have finally been rolled out. I'm not sure why a competitive mode wasn't made available on day one. A basic online competitive mode with a functional ranking system on day one is not an unreasonable expectation for a game like this. But then again, I don't understand why Multiversus launched with so little content in general. As the game now stands, there are currently 6 maps to fight on and only 19 characters to fight with only 2 starter characters. The other 17 you either have to grind for or purchase. Having put in a little over 2 hours in game, I've unlocked 3 characters, 2 through grind and 1 by purchasing them. I bought Batman because I just immediately had to play as the Dark Knight, because why not? And I unlocked Superman and Harley Quinn. One of the first obvious bits of criticism worth addressing is of course the ambiguity of the controls scheme. If you're playing on controller, then none of this will apply to you. But if you're playing on keyboard and mouse, as any proper dignified PC Master Race elitist is morally obligated to do so, things quickly become more than a bit awkward and confusing. By default, the game just assumes you're always using a controller, so most of the pop-up hints and tutorial guides will only tell you how to do a certain thing using the corresponding controller button, not the keyboard key. Likewise, it doesn't tell you that the basic light and heavy attacks can not only be accessed via your keyboard, but also via your left and right mouse buttons. The latter of which is far more convenient for those primarily accustomed to relying on the mouse. Also, even if you begin rebinding certain keys, the game will not automatically recognize those alterations, and its loading screen and in-game tips, not to mention general menu navigation, will still assume you're using the default controls, being the controller. It's all very odd, at least until you consider the following. As I mentioned earlier, the main menu from which you navigate between different game modes and other options is presented in a very Netflix-esque horizontal left to right playlist queue. If Multiversus was developed first and foremost as a PC game, this design choice would have made no sense, since the UI unnaturally extends the amount of time players will be spending navigating it here on PC compared to a static screen with everything in one place. The same could be slightly said of controllers, of consoles, but to a lesser degree. You often see this UI design approach in console games specifically, so when you consider Multiversus has a very console-driven UI design, it makes total sense why the developers would likewise have prominently featured console controls as the default control scheme, and put little, if any, effort into supporting rebinding as a viable alternative. You technically can rebind your controls, the game will just refuse to formally recognize those changes, which is just really lazy on the developer's part. However, the biggest fault I have with the game is the very limited amount of content made available on day one and their lack of plans of any substantial content updates moving forward. At launch, there are 17 characters in the full roster and 6 playable maps. The number of characters itself isn't horrible per se, but it's definitely lackluster when it comes to fighting games in general. Super Smash Bros. Brawl had 35 characters. Smash Ultimate had 69 characters. I know, funny, we all love the number 69, right? Well, Ultimate definitely does too. And that's not including the additional DLC characters, which brought the total to 82. 82 characters. The normal retail version of Mortal Kombat 11 had 25 characters, not including the DLCs, which brought that number up to 37. Even Sony's short-lived Smash knockoff game, PlayStation All-Stars, had 20 characters, not including the 4 additional DLC fighters. Wherever you want to argue that 20, 30, 40, or even 50 characters should be the default starting point when it comes to a new fighting game, I think most of us can agree that hitting the ground running with only 17 playable heroes is more than a bit disappointing. And that's without even considering the identities of the leaked characters that have been either cancelled or reserved as future DLC. We're talking Gandalf, Daenerys Targaryen, Fred Flintstone, the Powerpuff Girls, Scooby-Doo, the Joker, Harry Potter, the Wicked Witch of the West, etc. If it was up to me, I would have sped up the release plans for these characters, and I would have changed up the whole seasonal content model so as to make each season last no more than a month, release one new character at the beginning of each month, and release one new map during the middle of said month. That way you have new content releasing on a consistent twice per month schedule. It would still be nowhere close to matching the amount of content that bigger games like Fortnite put out on a monthly basis. But one of the few added benefits of not being one of the biggest games on the market is that your obligation to your players in terms of constantly putting out fresh new content to keep them coming back is likewise nowhere near as high. Again, this immediate need for an increased deliverance of content is largely the fault of WB for rushing this game out with very little in the way of replayable content outside of the absolute minimum. You can play 1v1s, 2v2s, 4-man free-for-alls, and you can play 2-player versus AI. That's it. Not including private matches, which are also a thing. There's no single-player or co-op story campaign. There's not even your typical Smash-like beat the opponents in a linear order classic mode, or even stupid minigame modes like Smash's Stadium mode, which had stuff like Smash the Targets where you'd have to run around and destroy specified targets before time runs out, or the Home Run Battle mode where you and another player team up to beat the shit out of a punching bag in order to send it flying as far as possible, or the PvE modes like Boss Battles or Multi-Man Brawl, the former being where you beat up a bunch of dungeon bosses one at a time or 2x2, and the latter being where the game keeps spamming you with AI opponents in groups, and you try to defeat as many as possible before you get eliminated. Mortal Kombat has similar game modes like Test Your Luck, where a randomizer gets to determine who you fight and what random positive or negative modifiers will apply to your match, any of which may help or hurt you in various ways. There's 101 different solutions to the problem, but the problem remains the same. Lack of replayability is one of the greatest stumbling blocks in this game's path. If Multiversus doesn't want to end up like most AAA online games and lose 90% of its player base within the first 30 or 60 days, it has to find a way to drastically increase the amount of content on display. Since 6 maps, 17 characters, and 4 basic game modes is not enough to sustain it long term. What they have now is fine, but just fine at best. I played a few hours of it over the course of a few days, both on my own and with various friends. At this point, there's nothing about it that tempts me to come back to anytime soon, and I doubt I'm the only one that'll feel that way over time. Since I've run through a number of cons, let me circle back to a few final points in the game's favor. The optimization here on PC is very, very good. The game should run absolutely fine on any mid or high-range PC. The official minimum GPU specs listed are NVIDIA GeForce GTX 550 Ti or AMD Radeon 7770, which odds are if you bought your gaming PC in the past 5 or 6 years, you probably have something of that quality or better installed, so no worries there. I certainly had no trouble running it at any point on my NVIDIA GeForce 2070 RTX. The customization options likewise are fantastic. I wasn't a big fan of the default HUD, so I elected to change it up into something a bit more akin to how Smash Bros. Handles its UI. Something a bit cleaner that allows me to focus on the fight rather than other visual information. There's a decent array of options that allow you to more or less move or hide certain UI elements, in addition to the usual volume sliders and other options you'd normally expect in any other game. Overall, Multiversus is not a great game. It's solid, nothing about it is inherently bad, but neither does it do anything so remarkably exceptional that it stands out in any way from its competition. If you're looking for just a free-to-play Smash clone, albeit one with clunkier controls and animations, and a more limited character roster, then this is fine. But do not go into it deluding yourself that it's going to be the next big thing because it may have had a decent day one launch. I'm telling you, my optimism is not high moving forward. As ever, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to click the like button and comment below what you think of the game. Comments really help my videos get boosted in the algorithm, and plus I read and respond to nearly all the comments you give me. So even if you just want to drop a comment to say hi or get my opinion on something, even if it's unrelated, I'll be more than happy to talk with you down below. Likewise, subscribing and clicking the bell really helps. I know it's cliche, but YouTube is YouTube. You know how it is. This is Warrior Dan signing out. Stay awesome, everybody. Stay safe. Peace out.